you can't substitute the experience of being out in big nature and talking about things that matter. There's no way to simulate that in a classroom.
How much impact have we done over the last 3 years? And we were really surprised by how much that adds up quite quickly.
Episode 81 with Samantha Jones and Jason Pemberton on discovering your purpose via business for good and social enterprise development from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Published 4th of July 2018.
It's very sensible. No Macarena in the middle of the street. No.
My job is mainly to keep Jason on track, I think.
Thanks for tuning into Talks with Innovators, Creatives and Enterprises, where we gather people making positive dents on society by amplifying some of their stories, learns and journeys to now. I'm your host, David Binstead. Today's episode is brought to you by Do Good Jobs and with support from our Patreon patrons, BizDojo and Collider Wellington. As a quick reminder of our returning guests, here's a short bio of each. From Air Force Logistics to ethical fashion and whole of supply chain development, our first guest is co-founder of Little Yellow Bird, an ethical uniforms and clothing supplier. Cohort 1 Edmund Hillary Fellowship Fellow, multi-award-winning Woman of Influence, Young New Zealand Innovator of the Year 2017. I'm pleased to welcome returning guest Samantha Jones.
Hi.
International man of mystery, of social good and of positive impact. Our second guest is dedicated to developing social enterprise from New Zealand. Behind the scenes, he was integral to the planning and successful delivery of the 2017 Social Enterprise World Forum. He's a music creator and performer, all-round useful person to know, and co-creator of the campus outdoors-based impact courses, which we'll ask him and Sam about shortly. Very happy to have Jason Pemberton back around the talking, not singing microphones.
Does that mean you're happy that I'm not singing? Because I'm taking that personally at this point.
Two co-conspirators of the campus outdoors-based initiative to help people develop a social enterprise. Just give us the headline. What is it?
Pretty much we take people outdoors and teach them about social enterprise and impact-led work. You kind of imagine some elements of Outward Bound and some elements of business development courses and some elements of how to do impact well and just smash them all together in some big nature.
Also, we've been teaching some people how to camp because we have had some first-time campers on our course.
It's a thing that we didn't expect.
Yeah.
Pack warm. Yeah, I've got a hoodie. Okay, here's a packing list.
We did do a pre-course survey, so we always knew what level of camping experience or what level of social enterprise people are coming into the course with, so we were able to prepare for that. But I think, not everyone does have that same childhood. I mean, we're all quite a similar, probably, backgrounds, and so we've grown up with that, but certainly I don't think that's the case for every New Zealander. And not all of our courses have been camping-based either, so as it's got progressively colder, that hasn't really been viable, and our last camping outdoor course was particularly cold. So we have, for the winter months and for some of our courses, we are doing it still in kind of an outdoor setting, but more lodge-based. So doing all the same activities, but still have a warm shower and a warm living room to dry out in.
You've run 2, 3, 4 courses so far? 3 courses so far, all of them based out of Christchurch. Mm-hmm. Just give us a quick overview. How have they been going?
Really well. So we've had about 8 participants per trip. We've had different numbers. We've been trialling different things. About 8 participants per trip. The feedback that we've been getting has been really awesome. There are a couple of the activities that people have really, really connected with, which is really good to know. And everyone's also really appreciated the huge diversity of people. So all of the courses, we've had an age spread of at least 20 years, which is quite incredible to think about for such a small group. We've had clinical psychologists, we've had students, we've had young professionals from a range of different things. We've had people who are not at university and aren't on that sort of journey. Real interesting mix of people.
But we've also been really open that it's a very new venture and it's an iterative process. So what's been quite cool to see is that the people coming on these first initial courses have actually been helping us to shape what it is. So each course has been quite different to the previous one because we're constantly learning and taking what's been working well and what hasn't, and we're almost using that as a model for social enterprise in and of itself. And that, you know, we could have spent this whole year trying to figure out exactly what we want to teach and exactly how this format's going to work and planning for it, but actually not getting any live data, which is what's important when building a business. So we've been pretty open with that and being, you know, transparent around our budget and our time and what we've put into it and how we've gone about that to use it almost as a case study as well.
Yeah, and that's been pretty much the teaching approach, is it's less about come and sit in a room and learn how to do social enterprise and more come and see behind the curtain of what's actually involved with starting and running a social enterprise from the ground up.
Without giving too many of the magic sauce secrets away, could you just talk us through roughly what a weekend might look like for somebody who's thinking about coming on a course?
Yep, so we start on a Thursday. It's always at a secret location, and there's a bunch of challenges for people to undertake to find out where they're going and some things for them to do along the way. And then we've had different courses take a slightly different emphasis based on what people want to get out of it. So sometimes it's more around personal development, well-being, leadership, that sort of stuff. Sometimes it's more around how to start a social enterprise or impact evaluation or measuring your impact, those sorts of things. So we've got a bunch of different activities that essentially we'll put together as like Lego blocks to suit the needs of the people who are showing up. So there's about 2/3 of the things are outside. There's a small amount of stuff that we do kind of sitting around the proverbial campfire and yarning. We do some case studies, deep dive case studies on a few different social enterprises to show behind the curtain and to get the official story versus the unofficial story and showing how these sorts of things can unravel.
That must be hilarious. And I mean that in both positive and potentially negative way.
Oh, absolutely. This is kind of one of my observations of the emerging social enterprise scene, is that it's very easy to point at all the shiny success stories, and people think that you have to be a shiny success to be successful, without realizing that actually every shiny success is an absolute cluster mess behind, but it's just the way that we choose to live into the identity of the thing and what we put out into the world. And so I mean, a lot of these things are just it's general marketing, it's general business development, it's general stuff, but you put it into a social enterprise context as well, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it's doing some good and you're still moving forward, then well done, keep going.
Who's the course for?
People that are interested in social enterprise, so it can be people that have not done social enterprise at all before, through to people that have a basic understanding or who have been doing it for a short amount of time. Anyone that's been involved in the sector for a couple of years, it's probably too basic for. However, we are looking at potentially doing other courses where maybe we focus on different areas, such as how to maximize impact, or more well-being things. Are you getting what you need out of this? And that might be for a different audience. But the 101 kind of MVP model that we've gone for is people just entering or just starting to become familiar with the social enterprise sector.
And would it be fair to say that you're trying to positively influence hearts and minds on that journey to impact business?
On the one hand, there are a lot of people who are on a particular track who think that it's the only track and they're not terribly stoked about that track. So helping them to recognise that there are lots of different ways that we can approach life and work and business. And then on the other hand, when it comes to starting a social enterprise or some impact-led work, there are a lot of really common mistakes, and there are a lot of things that it's very easy to do very wrong. And so we're trying to help people bridge over those crevasses rather than fall into them.
So I'm really curious to ask, how do you divide up your course plans to match the distinct skills you each bring to the party?
We kind of had broad overarching what each would be responsible for initially, and I guess the skills that I brought along initially were the logistics skills and the practical skill around building Little Yellow Bird, while Jason is really excellent in delivering programs relating to social enterprise. So I think you probably took the lead on developing the content more. I mean, it was a collaborative approach, but doing that side, and I would do logistics, but to be honest, it kind of ended up crossing over in most places. But it was kind of our idea. And then in terms of the day-to-days, we have different modules that we're kind of the lead for. And we add in bits here and there, but we have one person who's in charge of this particular module, and we do have a list of objectives that we're trying to achieve. But it's always different. It depends what the people in the group bring up. Some people might be, or some groups might be very environmentally focused, where others want to talk about more of the social aspects. So it's very open, but we have kind of a key framework of what we want to achieve through each session.
So, looking back at the initial 3 courses, what has surprised you?
I think I really enjoyed the second course we run. It was an outdoor course. We had a really, really diverse group of people. And I think the people that made the most difference, or in my mind, and where we can make the most difference, was we had a couple of engineering students on the course, and they had never even considered this type of work or anything. A friend of a friend knows us who said, you should go on this course. And I genuinely actually think that they left that course on a different path, or potentially looking for a different path, when they knew that they didn't actually want to be engineers and that wasn't necessarily right for them, but they were kind of so stuck on that path. And I think that having that weekend away and the people that they met and the things that we ran through with them, I think might have shifted that. It'll be interesting to see what they end up doing in the next couple of years, but I do think that was possibly a shift.
I think what's actually surprised me the most is how exhausting it is. I mean, I've done a lot of teaching, a lot of training, I've done a lot of outdoor-based work. I did the whole Camp America thing a couple of times, and I think the energy and the expertise that everyone's bringing from their different worldviews, just actually 1 + 1 really is equal. 1 + 1 really is equaling 15, and it's just a lot more involving than what I anticipated. We knew it was going to be hard work and those sorts of things, but we've both walked away from each of the courses quite exhausted, in a good way. But that's been really quite surprising, because it's just a completely different sort of project and learning experience than any of the others that I've worked on, even though it's made up of lots of different things that we've both done before.
I think because the first 3 courses we ran were the only 3 weekends we were both available for like the first quarter
of the year.
And so we kind of ended up putting ourselves in this position where we actually didn't really have a weekend off properly for the first part of the year. And I think we kind of got to June. We were originally going to do a course in June, and we were just both like, we just need to take some time off and recharge, because we both have our own other ventures and programs and projects that we're involved with, and those also take up huge amounts of our time.
I think the biggest understatement I've heard this year.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So Kiwi.
Well, we started campus because we were like, we're so busy and we don't go camping enough, and we went camping over New Year's, and we're like, we want to do more of this.
Let's make a social enterprise around it.
Yeah, I don't know if that was necessarily the best way to achieve going camping more, but it certainly meant we've gone camping more, but with a whole lot of extra work.
Yeah, exactly.
How do 2 busy people pull something like this together? Because I'm going to ask you in a second about the funding side of things on a shoestring.
So there's a short answer, which is we were literally camping. We were literally camping over summer, the 2 of us and some other friends as well, and hanging out, having a few brews, and thought, man, this is rad. Wouldn't it be great if we could do this more often? And then we did it. That's kind of the short answer. The long answer is that for me, it's something I've thought about over a long time. I have spent a lot of time teaching and training in the outdoors. I was a water ski instructor. And then I'm now doing a lot of teaching and training for...
But you get your hair wet.
Yeah, this is before I had a ponytail. Now I do a lot of teaching and training for a leadership lab and for the Mental Health Foundation and for the Aotearoa Foundation, and I've run some of my own programs as well. And it's like, well, actually you can't substitute the experience of being out in big nature and talking about things that matter. There's no way to simulate that in a classroom. And I've seen the power of that from a personal development perspective and from professional development and values development, all of these wonderful things that can happen in big nature. And we know that starting a social enterprise requires us to understand a lot of these deep things about ourselves and our own thinking. And so it was kind of sitting in the back of my brain, and I think it was in Sam's as well. It's like, there's something here. And we just happened to be drunk around a campfire and talked about it about 4 times. So 4 times drunk and then about twice sober. And then we put up some dates and sold out 3 trips and off we went.
Why do you think the sector needs this as an additional resource and option?
I think what Campus is actually just a really informal, fun way to experience something different. We're not trying to replicate things that already exist. It should be an extension of what's already out there, and should be an option or a pathway to go into the more maybe formal structure, or vice versa. I think that to actually get real sector growth and get real change, you need lots of different options, and one particular style or option is not going to suit everyone. I think what we offer is quite unique. And it's also, like we talked about, there are a lot of New Zealanders who have never gone camping or experienced the outdoors, and we live in this beautiful country. And if you don't appreciate and go out and enjoy nature, then how can you expect to want to preserve it or create businesses that have that as an essential value? So I think taking it out and putting it in nature is actually a really important factor in what we're trying to all build here, and it should be considered as well.
Touch very briefly on the funding model, and it's quite an interesting funding model that you've got.
Yeah, so when we were starting this thing off, we were only interested in adding value, and we thought there would be lots of ways of doing this that we could make money from it. And we're both lucky enough to be in the personal position where we don't have to make money from it, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't getting people to pay for something that then wasn't adding value. So we kind of put it out there as an experiment. It was a small booking fee, and then we made it clear that afterwards we were going to ask people to make a donation. And I think about 95% of people did actually make a donation afterwards. And so where we're at now is that we know how much it costs to run these things. We know realistically the time that's involved and all that sort of stuff. We've got a real working budget, and we know what the thing needs to cost. And so we're starting to try a few different models, a few different funding models. But what we're most interested in is providing a different type of experience and making that accessible for the people who would actually get value from it. And the dollars and cents side of it, we just needed to make sure that we weren't losing money, and we haven't done that. So that's very helpful.
Next course, you've got one coming up in Christchurch, and then a winter course in Wellington area.
So we really want to make sure we get the courses that we're currently offering to a really high standard that we're really happy with. And I don't honestly think we're quite there yet. I don't think we're far away either, but I think we want to make sure we've got that right before we look to replicate it anywhere else.
It's David here, halfway through my chat with Samantha Jones and Jason Pemberton about their outdoors-based courses to help people make positive dents on the world. Samantha's also a keynote speaker at the upcoming 10th Social Enterprise World Forum in Edinburgh this September, where I'm stoked to be publishing daily shows as an official media partner, which just leaves the small matter of how I'm going to get there. In a moment, the episode's second half dives into what sort of shape the developing New Zealand social enterprise movement is in. Before that, I wanted to mention another impact-based organisation who are helping connect good people with interesting voluntary and paid opportunities, and who are also supporting me and getting this show into your brain. What if there was a way to search for positive impact New Zealand jobs, internships and roles? Perhaps you're re-evaluating your career and want to dip your toe in some new areas of interest. Or you're a student wanting to connect with the social impact movement. Well, you're in luck, as Do Good Jobs is a Kiwi jobs board connecting great people to do good. They connect passionate, talented people, aka do-gooders, with work vacancies that aim to create social and environmental change. Job listings are from impact-focused organisations and social enterprises in New Zealand, with listings including paid employment, voluntary roles and internships. Check their site and regular blog, which is listed in the show notes, to access great resources and profiles of do-gooders supporting others to do good. Julia, their founder, was a guest way back on episode 41, where you can hear more of the organisations and her background. She's also publishing a series of #EcoGeek Instagram posts to show how she's walking the impact walk. Check the show notes for links to all of those places. My thanks to Julia and Do Good Jobs for their support of this show. Over the last 81 episodes, this Making Positive Dents audio project has connected in the digital with listeners in nearly half of all the countries in the world. Contact me to inquire about episode sponsorship or by making a personal donation to help this show get on the road to sustainability. You can do that via Patreon, patreon.com/twicepodcast. Right, back to my chat with Samantha and Jason and a dive into the state of social enterprise in New Zealand. Whether sector, movement or ecosystem, it's come a long way in the few short years I've been chatting with impact-minded guests, mostly from New Zealand. Let's start with Sam's view. How do you reckon the sector is developing?
I find that quite a difficult question to answer because I feel like I'm actually in a bubble most of the time, and all the people around me are kind of in the same bubble. So to answer it, I feel like I have to step out of that, but I feel like I don't really get that much opportunity to step out of it. And so from my perspective, I think it is thriving, but I think I'm in that really fortunate position where we were one of the, not the first, but one of the earlier businesses to kind of, as this was becoming popular. And so we have had a lot of support. And I don't actually think that's common for a lot of other businesses, but that has been my experience. So I'm not actually sure. That's something I'm trying to figure out and learn and see what others, and I obviously have a lot of these conversations, and yeah, I don't know if I can actually answer that question because I'm still trying to work that out for myself.
All three of us having participated in different ways in the Social Enterprise World Forum last September. Pretty interesting moment or marker in the sand, as I'd call it, for the impact sector in New Zealand. Kind of looking back from episode number 7, Jason, and that sense of intent but not being very organised, not paraphrasing what you said, but to now being in a very different place looking back with government support, Akina, very developed role, involvement from both of you with that process as well. Well, what's your perspective on the sector?
Yeah, I would say that we're kind of in an awkward teenage period. There are a lot of people who have a pretty good understanding of what social enterprise is and who could draw a ring around the sector and say this is broadly what we think it is. And then if I jump out of that kind of world, there are a lot of organisations and spaces, I think, around the edges that I would personally say they're very much involved in the social enterprise sector, but they probably don't self-identify as being there. And so that's an interesting thing for me, is that I think that we're going through an identity development phase. Like over the next few years, people will start to have more of a broad and sophisticated understanding of what this stuff is and isn't, and we'll see more and more organisations standing up and saying we are it or we aren't it, and that will then inform what is the sector.
Kind of social enterprise hormones developing acne sort of scenario. Is that anywhere close?
Yep, totally. Because there are a lot of organisations who are out there saying, yeah, we're social enterprises, but they're not actually making any money. They don't have a viable business model at all, or they can't transparently show that they're having any sort of positive impact. But they self-identify as being a social enterprise, even though they would not meet some of the basic criteria that everyone would agree these are what defines what a social enterprise is.
Great segue, and also great reminder, somebody sitting around here recently published an impact report. How did they go for you, Sam?
Yeah, it's been very well received, which is exciting, and has actually, I guess, to go back to Jason's earlier point about it being important that social enterprises are profitable, is that it has turned into a really good sales tool for us as well, which honestly, genuinely, that wasn't why we created it. We wanted to create it because we also were just like, how much impact have we done over the last 3 years? We don't know exactly. And we keep saying we save all of this water and we reduce the need to use all of these chemicals and we provide fair trade labour, but we actually didn't know what that equated to, and we were really surprised by how much that adds up quite quickly. And so we produced this internally. It took our team quite a while to pull it all together and then make it look presentable and then put it out there. But we were really, really pleased with the end result. And people have been asking me, which agency did you use to produce this? And like, we just did it internally. Like, we don't have enough money to afford an agency, so don't know how much money you think we're making. But yeah, no, it's been really good. But alongside that, and kind of we touched on it earlier, was talking about some of the things that have been difficult. And Little Yellow Bird, I guess naturally, because I'm one of the co-creators of Campus, has been one of those case studies where I quite openly share probably more of the story than I would in any other forum over what's been difficult and what hasn't worked and what's been a challenge. And that kind of inspired me to write a kind of like a follow-up to that impact report on the things that have been a challenge for us. And specifically like the learnings. So what did we change or do as a result of those things that have been difficult? Because I really felt that just providing that, shiny impact report of all we've done is only telling half the story. I felt to genuinely be a business that is standing up for the world we believe in and wanting to encourage other people to transition to that model, we kind of had to tell that side of the story too. So I am trying to be a bit more open about that side of things as well.
I'm absolutely incredibly amazed at looking back at almost 3 years ago, asking Ants Rowan down at Sea Lab in Christchurch, what the heck is this social enterprise thing all about? To now be in a position to firstly be very much more knowledgeable about the sector, but also secondly to see case studies and examples of people succeeding with impact first and also making a profit as well, which is just, to me, every time it happens, it's incredible. Looking to the future, though, of hopes, wild dreams, let's not get into the fantasies, but what are your hopes for the sector looking forward to the next indeterminate period of time?
I don't want it to be defined as a sector, because it's not a sector, it's a way of doing business. I've had a lot of discussions about this with Sylvia Zur from lots of different places. Because social enterprise isn't a sector at all, but I think that it needs to be seen as a sector and pointed to as a thing where people can understand what it is before everyone else then realises, well, this isn't a different thing, this is a way of doing anything. We've got some of the organisations that would point out as go-to examples like Kilmarnock, Little Yellow Bird, Trade Aid. Right there you've got manufacturing, you've got fashion industry, and you've got retail and consumer goods. It's just a completely different thing than defining it as a sector. And that's my hope, is that we're able to push past it being this other thing that sits over there in the corner, and that it becomes more of a mainstream, well, of course, this is how we are.
So what are your motivations then to be contributing to this impact space?
I love systems that work, essentially. And there are so many things out there that talk about one thing and deliver another. And that confuses and confounds and frustrates me.
Per your course detail, complex systems theory.
Yes.
Discuss.
So complexity science looks at the different ways that the world works. So sometimes there are really obvious cause and effect patterns between things, and when that's the case, it's kind of there's a best practice of what we should do. Other times the cause and effect relationships are a bit messier, or there's lots of them, and if you're like an expert, then you can figure it out. It's kind of like you take apart a Ferrari and there's a right answer to put it back together, and someone knows it, but I don't. But the point is there's an answer and it's out there somewhere. And that's very different to a complex system where there are cause and effect relationships that can't be mapped in the way that you could map the design of a Ferrari. Something like the Amazon rainforest. You cut down a tree in the Amazon rainforest and it's going to change and adapt. And if you put the tree back, it's going to change and adapt to something completely different, which wouldn't happen when you remove a spark plug and put a spark plug back. And the point is that anything to do with people is very much that Amazon rainforest type environment. You can't just put things back as they were before. We don't work like that. And all of the major structures of society are designed assuming that you can. And that's why there are so many things that just fall over seemingly unexpectedly. It's the mindset that we've got approaching the world assumes that things are linear when they're not. And that fascinates me. So, yeah, it speaks of lifestyle, it speaks of organizational design, it speaks of movement building, it speaks of intent and philosophy and ideology. And, yeah, I get super jazzed about all this stuff, and Sam's eyes glaze over. It's great.
I was like, what was the question again?
And also at a really basic level, Part of your background is from HR and psychology as well. So I'm guessing this is what sometimes gets you, in cerebral terms, quite turned on to go, how can we make this better?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm absolutely driven by ideas. If we look at like a strengths finder, a character set type thing, my number one is ideation, which is like the forming of an abstract concept from lots of disparate things. And yeah, my studies were in psychology, human resources, and philosophical logic. So you put those three together, and it sort of makes sense of who I am. Yeah, I've forgotten what the question was.
Interesting combination of arts and science, yeah?
Yeah, and it wasn't, I didn't walk into university saying, this is what I want to do. I walked in with the course reader open and said, well, I want to do that paper, and I want to do that paper, and I want to do that paper. So it meant that the thing ended up being quite authentic to me, but it was totally unintentional. And I just had a really good course advisor. She was rad.
And Sam, do you try and make sure that Jason doesn't talk about this too much at the weekends?
My job is mainly to keep Jason on track, I think.
That's hurtful and probably accurate. You've got a lot more jobs, but that's probably the one that takes up more of your brain space than anything.
Where can people reach and find you online?
Oh, Samantha Ray Jones. I think my Twitter is Sam Ray Jones or something like that. But you can easily find me through Little Yellow Bird social media or website, so littleyellowbird.co.nz.
Yeah. Yeah, same. Facebook or campus.org.nz, or my website is youthink.co.nz. Easy.
You can connect with talks with innovators, creatives and enterprises on Twitter and Instagram at TwicePodcast, and me on Twitter at David_Binstead. Lovely hanging out with you both, Samantha Jones.
Thank you.
And Jason Pemberton.
Do I have to say thank you? You're like, say thank you.
No, you can say whatever you like.
David, it's been an absolute pleasure.
I don't mind again. I feel like mine sounded really weird.
Kia ora, it's David here, rounding out my chat with Samantha and Jason, repping their campus outdoors-based courses, recorded here in the pod cave at Biz Dojo Co-work Wellington. The conversation continues after this short outro with sidebars that didn't fit into the main 30-minute episode. Here's a few of my takeaways. On the campus courses, the important role of big nature, as Jason describes it, to positively influence mindsets about making positive impact. Seeing how they've delivered a minimum viable product on which they're iterating and fine-tuning course by course. The word cluster mess, the acknowledgement of course delivery being exhausting, and their courses extending, not replicating, what's available to people. The importance of impact reporting and presentation, even on a shoestring, and having and keeping a lean mindset in conjunction with complex systems theory. On social enterprise in New Zealand, boy, have things moved on a lot in less than 3 years. One great example is the preparation and successful delivery of the Social Enterprise World Forum, bid for and delivered by Arkina Foundation. They are the iterative product of the Hikurangi Foundation, which itself was brought to life by support from the Tyndall and Todd Foundations. Social Enterprise has one of Hikurangi's ex-team in government now in the form of Green Party co-lead and Wellington local James Shaw. I'll be exploring some of the learns and legacy from the World Forum last year, a little more in episodes before September and this year's 2018 Forum. On a personal level, the fact it's been almost 3 years since I last sat down with Jason back in episode 7 of this show amazes me. Many things have changed in that time, but my own commitment to capturing and amplifying the stories and learns of people making positive dents on society has not. This show is a project to amplify the stories of people making positive impacts through their work, and I hope that I can be in Edinburgh to share daily insights and learns to those who can't make it there. You can find out more about Samantha's and Jason's work, and that of others mentioned via comprehensive links and show notes via your podcast app of choice, and also via twicepodcast.com. Episodes now feature chapter markers, which mean you can jump to specific parts of the conversation and access audio with related pictures if you're listening in a podcast app like Overcast or Pocket Casts. Thanks to Marco Arment for making that magic available to podcast producers free of charge. Additional to episode sponsor Do Good Jobs, I'm grateful to the following organisations and companies for their support: Emily and Carl from Plankton Agency for the new show logo design, which I'm happy to have received heaps of positive feedback about. Check out their great work and services over at www.plankton.agency. Look up Biz Dojo for co-work countrywide and the Collider Wellington programme of monthly events. Both organisations have sponsored the show for the last year and continue to support the show getting to the digital airwaves. You can share a favourite episode with your mates via a short note and tag them and us in a comment at Twice Podcast via Twitter, Instagram and Facebook if you're into that kind of thing. You can also show fellow humans how easy it is to subscribe by searching the first few words of Talks with Innovators, Creatives and Enterprises via Apple Podcasts, Spotify and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks again to episode 81 guests, to sponsor Do Good Jobs, and most importantly, a big thank you to you for giving us time in your ears. It means a lot. Cheers. Hey listeners, this is where you'll find the post-show segments containing bits and pieces from the conversation that I still think are relevant and usually irreverent, but which don't fit into the approximately 30-minute main episodes. Want to hear more, less or different episode formats, lengths and insights? Feel free to contact me via the show's contact page at twicepodcast.com/contact. Thanks. Jason, what was your first, your worst and your best jobs?
Oh, that's a hard question. First, what was my first job? I mean, it would have been something like babysitting, I guess, or like ongoing job. It would have either been lawn mowing or feijoa picking. I worked at a feijoa orchard for a long time.
Sweet. Or should I say sour?
Sour. Tart, perhaps. That was my first. My worst job. Oh, it depends what we mean by worst, really. I've had some pretty interesting jobs. I worked in construction and stainless steel fabrication for a while, and they were great. I learned a lot. Super tactile. I really enjoyed that part. But also they started really early in the morning, which I'm not a fan of. And the community of people who I was working with was quite different than the community of people that I work with now. So as someone who's driven by ideas and you know, philosophy and impact and those sorts of things, those weren't the sort of conversations that you usually have after you've been welding a stainless steel table. So some aspects of that were pretty unenjoyable. But yeah, I don't think I've ever had a really, really bad job that I totally hated. What was the third one? First, worst?
Best.
Well, I enjoy what I do now. I mean, I'm self-employed. I don't really have a job, as it were. But I essentially only do things now that I really want to do. Sometimes I get paid for them, sometimes I don't. Getting paid to play music is pretty excellent. I've done a lot of that. Again, it gets pretty old sometimes, but yeah, there have definitely been a number of times where I'm on stage sort of belting out Tina Turner's Simply the Best or something like that, and just sort of pausing for a moment going, wow, I'm getting paid to do this right now. It's pretty outrageous.
So Sam, we've previously asked you on episode 50 about your first, worst and best jobs, but can I just twist it slightly and ask about your impact first, worst and best jobs?
I did a lot of tutoring through high school and then university as well. So maybe that was potentially... I did a lot of volunteering as well. So I did, through various charities through high school. I went in, volunteered in an orphanage in Russia for a while. So probably that was, I guess, my first, taster of, giving back or being involved in that community. Oh, working with Jason's pretty terrible.
Obviously.
No, I love campus, but I mean, some of those camping nights were pretty cold. That was challenging.
Sam got stung by 2 bees on our second campus. Oh, was it second or first course?
I think it was the second one.
And also got really, really sick. So dropping her home at the end of it was hilarious because she was just like, I just want to go. I was like, okay, I'll deal with everything. Goodbye. Have fun. Sleep.
And then best, I mean, I probably, that's an easy one because my job was Little Yellow Bird. Like, that is my, main role. And I absolutely love everything about it. I definitely, my background, my training, everything that I've done prior to this has positioned me perfectly to do well at it. And I think we are starting to make some real changes, and that makes me exceptionally motivated to keep going.
General knowledge question, is resilience the new happiness?
No, I don't like the term resilience. Noting that I came very close to working in a job called Chief Resilience Officer, but resilience is a wonderful term, and at its core it means some very excellent things, and most people interpret it to mean something slightly different than that, and for that reason I don't like it. I've been recently reading Nicholas Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile, I think the book is called, and I'm really interested in the concepts of anti-fragility. I won't go into it, but I don't think resilience is the new happiness, but there's something in that world that could be a pretty good measure of.
See, I tend to disagree because I think resilience, I wouldn't say it's the new happiness, but I think it is one of the most important and one of the most key things to be successful. And, you know, that we all know that success is also linked to happiness. Not always, but it's definitely a contributor. I definitely think that, like, I formerly was trained and learned resilience through the military, and learning those skills and coping mechanisms have certainly helped me become a happier person, I think. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's the new happiness. But I definitely think it's important.
And as two very creative people, can you draw me a word picture, and feel free to riff off each other, of what the scene of people arriving at the destination of one of your outdoor courses, what is it? Just describe it to me. What does it look like?
Our last course arrived really late because they didn't follow instructions, right? So they arrived like at 10 p.m. or something.
Yeah, it was quite late.
It was really dark.
Yeah, it was. They I actually backtracked slightly to go and find them at their second to last stop. I sort of intercepted them and gave them a bit of a fast forward button. They were super pumped, actually. I was quite stressed out on that last course when it was getting so late, and we thought that everyone was going to be having a terrible time. And actually they were, when they arrived at the stop, I'd kind of hidden myself, so they didn't know that I was there at first. And they were all like, yeah, and buzzing and clapping and laughing and like looking around for the instructions and those sorts of things. So yeah, that was super rad. And then by contrast, the one before where we were at a different location and it was still light when everyone arrived, and they were all laughing and clapping, and we'd given them some questions to discuss, and one of the topics was cheese, and there was quite a lot of discussion about cheese. Super.
Yeah, I think
buzzy.
people were just excited because we haven't, broken them down or made them sleep in a cold tent. So they're excited and wanting to learn. And then, the next day we make them go on a big hike and we get lost, or don't give them all the instructions and make them creatively problem solve and question how they look at the world. So they're very optimistic at the start.
Do you mean relieved or excited? Or is excitement the result of being relieved?
No, I genuinely think it's excitement because they're going on an adventure. And they know that they're going on an adventure because they know that they don't know where they're going, and that they're uncovering it together, and they're meeting all these new people. And yeah.
Yeah, so the very first campus, we didn't do that. We didn't do the kind of adventure challenge to get there. And it was a totally different vibe when people arrived and you're still in that kind of awkward phase of who are you and what are you doing here? And we recognised that wasn't quite the vibe that we were wanting to achieve at that point. And so came up with a kind of creative solution. And it's essentially an amazing race scavenger hunt to get there.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
And we've not actually done it yet, but it looks fun.
Well, we've kind of done it in our heads.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. I wrote it all and then gave it to Sam, and she was like, and we'll just pare this back. It's like, yes, that's very sensible. No, no, Macarena in the middle of the street. No.
You touch on one of the really important elements, I think, about a lot of what you both do, is that they're both extremely challenging, but also it has to be fun. And to what extent do you think fun is absent in those old jobs that we may have jettisoned in the past, that is more likely to be present in social enterprises?
There are a lot of profit-oriented organisations that are fun, that do have a lot of fun. I think the difference between those organisations and social enterprises is actually meaning. They give people a sense of meaning. Yesterday I spent a bit of time in one of the government departments who do some very cool stuff. It's sort of in service of people, very much so. And they all spoke about how much they loved their work for that aspect, that they were serving people and those sorts of things. And at the end of the day, they're public servants and having to do some stuff within some certain rules. And so that was the clash for them, is the structure and the process and the need for all of that sort of stuff, and what they saw as the really valuable bit. And that's kind of the same with the social enterprise, in that at the end of the day, you've got to be making money and you've got to be able to keep the doors open through that. And it's always in pursuit of meaning. And I think because of that, you end up with a really fun environment because people want to be there.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole spectrum of different personalities and organisations. I think the people, I don't know, definitely the people that have joined our company are all, wanting to make impact, but also they value having a fun work environment as well. But it does sometimes get to the point where we've just been talking for like half an hour about nothing. We're like, okay, we've got to focus. We've got to get this done today, because you kind of do all get carried away sometimes. But that's part of it as well, and that's part of the reason why I don't think any of us dread going into work, or majority of the people don't dread going into work, because we make it fun, and we can't be as competitive in terms of offering the best salaries, and we can't offer the best benefits at this point because we're still a reasonably new company. But we can offer a fun work environment, or, maybe more fun than some.
Jason, if there's an analogue object you can't live without at the moment, what is it?
My guitar.
Totally? I think that's what it was last time.
Probably.
Yeah. Quick description.
Her name is Lola. She's not a showgirl. I built her. It's a 6-string acoustic OM, Engelmann spruce top. What's East Indian rosewood back and sides, 14 fret body join, non-cutaway. That means nothing to most people, but you asked me to describe it.
I mean a lot to some people.
Yeah, acoustic electric, beautiful guitar.
Yeah. And has your answer changed at all, Sam, from last year about the analogue object or item you can't live without?
What did I say last time?
I think you may have said a notebook. Or
I think she would have said a cheese knife, let's be honest.
I don't know. I don't know if there's anything I couldn't live without. They're not analog, but I really love my dogs. I have 2 suitcases that are my own. I don't even own the personal effects in the house are not even mine. I think I have 1 painting and 1 candle.
Well, what's happening for you next 3 to 6 months that you haven't already talked about?
I don't know if we've talked about it, but we're both planning to go to the forum. And I'm going to another event prior to that with Global Shapers. Probably another India trip. And hopefully this project proposal that I was speaking about, which will be included in this show, maybe if it happens, will happen. Watch this space.
Any clues at all?
No.
Yeah. Jason?
I'm writing a book, actually.
Oh. What about?
Social enterprise, believe it or not.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No way.
Yeah, so I'm currently talking to a bunch of different organisations and people to figure out who would be interested in having something like this and what would be the benefit for them. So putting together a bit of a brief, and then it's going to be all case study based, looking at how social enterprise has emerged in New Zealand and what we can learn from that and how we can do it better, both from a New Zealand perspective and how we can test or pilot or showcase some solutions that could be globally relevant.
Will you both be putting that in your bursary applications? Or, this wasn't like a sort of preamble for that, but...
It's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. So yes.
No, true.
Yeah, I'm writing a book too. I'm writing 2 books.
And I'm actually, I'm starting a blockchain-based supply chain auditing tool.
Most memorable tramp or expedition or trip?
Earlier this year, the day before our first campus trip, I was hiking Abel Tasman when Cyclone Gita came through, which is the second time that I've been flooded out halfway through hiking Abel Tasman. So we ended up trapped in the Aotearoa hut, not Aotearoa Lodge, the fancy one, but the hut itself. We didn't know if we were going to be able to get out the next day. It was like about 41 k's back. And so, the next day I was meant to be teaching a program for Ākena and running our first campus course. and didn't know if I was going to get out of the hut or let alone make it back to Nelson to fly out. And we managed to get out and everything was fine. But that was quite memorable.
I not in a million years would have thought you'd have said Abel Tasman. I would have thought Nepal, anywhere else in the world. But Abel Tasman is a pretty wild place, especially in a cyclone.
Mm-hmm.
Samantha?
I don't know. Now that you've mentioned that, I'm actually just reflecting. Pretty much every walk I go on with you, we somehow get lost or something happens.
Almost like I'm not allowed to travel.
What would you sing?
Wagon wheel.
Oh, I will slap you. I won't. That's really rude.
His favourite song.
That's part of the reason I stopped playing at pubs, stopped gigging a lot, is that there's only so much you can take drunk people screaming, play Wagon Wheel.
Just a couple of bars.
It's not going to happen.
Every time I ask him to play Wagon Wheel,
Mm-hmm.
he never does it.
Mm-hmm. I know. Ruthless dictator.